Buddhism, the way of awakening. Today, there are roughly 350 million Buddhists around the world, roughly 6% of the world's population. Just as most Hindus don't strive for moksha in this lifetime, because of course only the Brahmins are the ones who can obtain moksha, and indeed everyone who is Hindu will inevitably desire to be reincarnated as a Brahmin so that they can reach or strive for that goal. Just as moksha is not something that is sought after by everyone who is Hindu in this lifetime, Buddhists don't strive for nirvana or parinirvana in this lifetime as well. In fact, most Buddhists don't even meditate, which of course, as we'll see, is essential for obtaining nirvana. The largest group of Buddhists, known as Mahayana Buddhists, known as the larger raft, seek to obtain good karma or merit by supporting Buddhist monks who are in the position to become bodhisattvas, and perhaps even award them more karmic merit from one of the heavenly realms. So if you're unable to become a monk and you are Buddhist, your next best option is to support the monastic community financially. There are other schools or expressions of Buddhism, Theravada and Mahayana. There's Pure Land, there's Zen. There are other ways and expressions of Buddhism, but the primary expression today is Mahayana. According to tradition, Siddhartha Gautama, the one who would become the Buddha, or the awakened one, was born a Hindu prince in northern India sometime in the 6th or 5th century BCE. His mother died when he was only 7 days old, and it's said that the Brahmana, the holy man who performed his mother's funeral rites, prophesied that Siddhartha would become a great king and military leader, or a spiritual teacher. So, wanting him to become a great ruler, as the story goes, his father, the king, set out to shield Siddhartha from experiencing or witnessing the suffering of the world. So he built Siddhartha a palace, indeed built it around Siddhartha, where he was provided every luxury imaginable. And according to the custom of his time, he married at the age of 16, but even still was kept in total seclusion, and this continued for another 13 years. Siddhartha was 29 before he encountered the real world, replete with suffering. One day, he ventured out beyond the palace walls, accompanied by his royal attendant. There he was confronted by 4 passing sights: a very old man, a diseased man, a decaying corpse, and a begging ascetic. Siddhartha asked of the first 3, will these things happen to me? Will I grow old? Will I perhaps get sick? Will I someday die? And of course, the response from his attendant was, yes, this is indeed the way of the world. But in terms of the begging ascetic, this was not assured. His attendant explained that the ascetic had renounced the world to seek release from the suffering of samsara, the cycle of birth, life, and death. Siddhartha was overcome by these sights, and the next day he left his kingdom, his family, his wife, and his son, overwhelmed by what he learned. So, during the night, he left everything behind to lead an ascetic life, just like the holy man he encountered. And so it was, determined to find a way to relieve the human causes of suffering, Siddhartha's quest began. He found himself drawn to the Shivaana Movement. This is a reform movement within Hinduism. Beginning sometime around the 6th century or so, it was made up of a collection of ascetic renunciant schools that, among other things, challenged the Brahmanical emphasis on Vedic ritualism and developed the philosophical systems that now ground the Eastern traditions. Initially, as I said, it was a reformed movement within the Hindu tradition, and it would later nurture and lead to the development of Buddhism as well as Jainism. For the next 6 years, Siddhartha excelled at Jnana Yoga and Raja Yoga. Jnana Yoga being the way of the intellect, of obtaining a connection with Brahman through intellect. And Raja Yoga being the way of mastering one's body so that one could master one's mind. When we think of yoga in the West today, we of course we think this is the image we get of someone who is maintaining certain postures and contorting the body. This would be Raja Yoga. So he mastered every concept and every practice within these two ways. Still, the cause of suffering remained elusive. So he intensified his Raja Yoga practice, enduring pain, fasting nearly to starvation, and refusing water. We can see here Siddhartha is visited by the god of death in the Hindu tradition, the god of destruction, of decay, Shiva. Though he had mastered these disciplines, even excelling beyond his teachers, the cause of suffering, it remained elusive to Siddhartha. So according to one tradition, one day Siddhartha became so depleted that he could hardly even breathe. Seeing that he was near death, a young girl was moved with compassion, and she offered him rice from her own bowl. Reluctant at first, he accepted her gift, and as he regained his strength, he discovered what he would call the middle way. The way between something in the middle, between self-indulgence, and of course this was demonstrated in his earlier life in the palace, and self-denial, utter and total self-denial, which of course is what he had practiced through the Raja Yoga. The middle way was somewhere in between these two. And so it was, he began feeding his body once again, and more insights began to emerge. So he vowed to meditate beneath a sacred fig tree without stopping until a final answer had arrived. Until he reached nirvana, the extinguishing of suffering and the causes of suffering. The causes being examples like ignorance and attachment, and most importantly, the ego. Then one day, then on the third day, as he was meditating beneath this tree, he had a battle with Mara, the tempter. Mara is the Hindu god of death and terror and seduction. And true to the final descriptor for Mara, once he had waged war against the Buddha, trying to distract him and prevent him from reaching nirvana, he sent one final test. The final test being the seduction, or the attempted seduction, of Siddhartha by Mara's 3 beautiful daughters. Having vanquished Mara, Siddhartha finally reached nirvana, and he became the Buddha. He lived and taught until his death at age 80, when he is said to have reached parinirvana, or the final nirvana. During his life as the Buddha, Siddhartha taught many things. The 4 Noble Truths contain the essentials of his message. These 4 truths, Siddhartha said, must be understood. The first one is that to live is to suffer. Now, when Siddhartha is talking about suffering here, the word is dukkha. This word is typically most commonly translated as suffering, But indeed, it's more than just this. Dukkha means unhappiness or dissatisfaction. Not necessarily pain that we may associate with the word suffering, but anything that is not as one would like it to be. And so the visual image here associated with this term is riding in a cart with a broken wheel. So that as one moves along, it's truly a bumpy ride. So the image is that life is a bumpy cart ride. So suffering is inevitable. And that the Buddha said the second truth is that suffering is caused by desire. And the third truth is that suffering can be overcome. And the fourth truth is that the way to overcome or to cause the cessation of suffering is to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. This is indeed the solution to suffering. It is the way out of suffering is trod on this particular road, this path. So, the path involves 8 sort of ways or steps, and they are as follows. Right view or right understanding, it's the right understanding of the nature of existence. It's truly understanding those 4 noble truths, so that when we understand that we are not our ego, we are no longer limited to a reactionary response. Number 2, right intention. The intention to devote oneself entirely to an investigation of the Buddha's claims, and a commitment to being honest and compassionate with oneself no matter what one discovers, without attachment. 3 is right speech, using honest and compassionate language with everyone we encounter. We no longer use our words to harm others or manipulate them through dishonesty. 4, right conduct. Our actions are motivated by a desire to serve others and not ourselves. 5, right livelihood. Whatever we do to support ourselves financially, the Buddha insisted we must do it, but not harm anyone or ourselves. And we must not attach ourselves to that particular identity, how we or others see us in this role. And in that way, understand that we are not our job. Number 6, right effort. This is cultivating self-knowledge and self-control without either trying to force our progress or getting careless. Number 7, right mindfulness. This involves being awake to the total range of one's experiences as a human self. The material body, feelings, emotions, thoughts, perceptions, which, when brought into complete harmony, no longer drive one to desire and clinging and ultimately suffering and discomfort. And finally, 8, right meditation. This involves cultivating meditation practices that help us become compassionate observers of the self. When we practice mindfulness regularly in a controlled environment through meditation, we learn how to recognize thoughts and desires as they arise, and eventually they no longer compel us with the same ferocity. Eventually, our desires have less power to influence the thoughts and actions that cause us and others our suffering. We'll pick up with part 2